Hello, my name's Alice. Thanks very much for having me today. It's really great to be here, and there's been some really cool talks so far, which have been really enjoyable. So I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that Assemble have been involved in, and I work for Assemble. We're a collective who work across the fields of art, architecture and design, and we've been going for about 5 years. We started in 2010, and fundamentally we're interested in addressing the disconnection between residents of a city and the processes by which a city is made, and how to sort of question people's agency in that process. And we do this through a number of different strategies. So some of it's through the design of buildings or public spaces. Sometimes that's building the buildings ourselves and opening that process up to the public, organising events and testing occupation of sites through activation of them, setting up digital infrastructures like websites as a way to sort of generate interest around a project, and designing the furniture, which sort of looks at sort of like smaller ways that people can engage with space, and also setting up the organisations themselves and helping to run them, which are the ones that end up being the projects that we're working on. So I'll start with our first project, which we did in 2010, when we were all working as volunteers and we wanted to try and do a project together. We looked for a site and we noticed there are a number of derelict petrol stations around London, and we wanted to try and make something that anyone had a reason to go to, so it wasn't just creating a pavilion. So we thought a cinema would be a really good thing to start with. And at the time, so this project's called the Sinner Onium. At the time, we were all volunteers. There was no client, no brief, no budget. And that gave us an incredible amount of freedom to sort of direct the project. So it was open for about 4 weeks, and it fantastically did really well, totally sold out. We programmed the whole sets of films as well and ran the space. Tickets were £5. And at the end of each screening, we showed a sort of series of B movies and stuff. And at the end of each screening, the curtain would rise up and everyone would walk out into the street again. So suddenly the spectator became the spectacle. So as part of that, because we were because there was very low budget, it meant we had to be very resourceful with materials and use what we could get in bulk and cheaply. So we looked at lots of sort of excess stock of large industrial materials. So we used scrap scaffold boards for the flip-up seats, and the old sort of shelves in the garage there to make this lit-up sign, and a roofing underlay, Tyvek, to make the festoon curtain. And it was built over a period of 3 weeks, and there were about sort of 200 or so people who came on site to help build it. It was a mixture of friends, family, and some passers-by. And all of the elements were designed crucially so that they could be made by anyone who had little or no skills to build a part of the project. So there were large sort of templates and drawings on sites, and us there to help sort of with the process. And it was a fantastic experience because it gave a real sense of sort of shared ownership over an unoccupied piece of land. And this was it when it was completed. And that, after the success of that project, then we were approached by the Barbican to do a temporary sort of satellite space for their summer exhibition called Watch Me Move, which was in 2011. And it was an exhibition about animation. And at the same time, we came across this site, which is owned by the London Legacy Development Corporation. It was just in the run-up to the Olympics in Hackney Wick. And we started to create a sort of story behind the site, that there was a stubborn landlord there who refused to move, and the flyover was built around him. And the project was called Folly for a Flyover. So it sort of tied into all of this sort of things about animation that the exhibition at the Barbican was looking at. And again, it was a big open construction process. At this point, we weren't even called Assemble. It was still a group of volunteers. And it was a scaffold frame structure, and it was built with timber bricks. There's something like 11,000 timber bricks They were all drilled and threaded on rope and tied back to the structure. And as part of that, we also programmed all the events and ran the bar there, and this was during a screening. So there would be sort of performances and cinema screenings happening under the flyover. And at the end of that project, ran for 3 months. And at the end of the project, the scaffold frame went back to the scaffolding company, and all of the bricks were remade into planters, which were installed in a primary school just down the canal. And they're used as gardening classes. So another project I'm going to talk about is called Yard House. So as many of you know, living in London is becoming like incredibly expensive, and there's like a growing lack of affordable workspace that's being made available for people. And we wanted to try and do a project that started to address that. And so we came up with a project that was basically looking at providing affordable workspace and taking advantage of sites awaiting development. So where you could have access to a site for like 5 to 10 years, but maybe you have to move on after that. It was funded by the London Legacy Development Corporation. And because it was to be generally affordable, it meant that we had to use, it had to be a very simple construction. And we used stock sizes of timbers. And everything is it's effectively just a big insulated shed. And they're all screwed together, so it can be taken apart really easily. And we've sort of invested in this sort of large central shared space in the middle. And this was it during construction. So not everyone in Assembled built this, but there was a group of people who did, and it was built over about a month. This was our stage photo. We made everything in it, the handrails, the staircase, and all of the tiles as well, which were concrete tiles made with cement fibres and pigment. And this is it during construction. Completed. And when it was completed, it was totally open plan. So, and we did a large call out to people to come and sort of, who wanted to rent the spaces. And we had lots of interest. And we started to choose people who had sort of similar types of work practice, so stuff that wasn't too noisy or too dusty, so they could work alongside together. And when they moved in, they all started building their own partitions and sort of inhabiting it themselves. And it's been really great, actually, because it's now up for... We work just in the building, to the right, and it's just created a proper community there now, and there are sort of 30 people working there, and they've all been there from the beginning, and now they run their own open studios nights and open everything. So another project, this is a project where we are working for Cafe Otto, who is sort of a music venue in North London. And they had access to this site, but again, it was a very low budget. Because this site, like many in London, is sort of signposted for a Crossrail vent in the next sort of 10 years, again, it had to be a temporary building, but it was a number of, for how many years it was allowed to be there was unclear. However, so they had a low budget, but they had a lot of material available, free material, lots of rubble. And so we looked at how we could use that as a resource to make the building. And so we started, again, it was a big open construction process, and Cafe Otter has a massive supply of very keen volunteers who are all big fans of the venue, and so that was, it was great for them to be involved in actually making their own project space. And we started to sort of dig the foundations and sift the rubble and build them into rubble bags that were then compressed down. It was very labour intensive. We did look at rammed earth, which was even more labour intensive, so we decided to go with this rubble bag option. And these are the walls going up. And then it was rendered with the rubble from the site. Here it's like bits of sort of brick and flint and stone that were used to what we called rubble dash, which created a good rain screen. And this was it when it was completed, and it's quite funny because now people walk by and they sort of think that these walls are prehistoric. I can't believe they didn't notice them before. But the good thing about this project is that when the building does eventually have to be demolished, the site will just go back exactly to how it was before, back to rubble again. And so I think what we were interested about, particularly in this project, was that how in the 19th century London was built from, London based on clay fields was made bricks from, and London was built from brick. Now the sort of modern day equivalent is like demolition rubble, and how we can use that as sort of like a useful material, sort of questioning what's usually seen as valueless, how it can be valuable. And this is it. And it's used very regularly for rehearsals and performances and stuff. This is it here. So as well as the design and construction of buildings, we're often involved in setting up the organisations that go on to run them as well. So this is Black Horse Workshop. This was funded by the Outer London Fund, which is set up as a result of the riots in 2011. And it was taking an existing building in Waltham Forest in northeast London, which is historically the sort of homeland of William Morris. And there's since been like a large sort of manufacturing area. And so we wanted to create something that was just like the library is a place for public space for learning, to make a sort of public workshop for like learning how to make things. And so we started off the project by writing the business plan for Black Horse Workshop, how it would run, what the membership system would be. Then we also were refurbishing the building. So now it's been running for 2 years, and there is a bench space, and it's on a sort of tiered membership system. And there's a cafe so that more people can come in, and a metal workshop and a wood workshop as well. And it's great because we still have quite a big involvement in this project because we're on the board, and so we can still sort of see it grow, which is nice. That's it celebrating its first birthday last year. So another project where we've been involved in setting up the organisation is Baltic Street Adventure Playground, which is in East Glasgow, and in an area called Dalmarnock. And Dalmarnock is a very sort of very low income area and high levels of poverty. And it's also the site which was the site of the Commonwealth Games. And there's been a lot of change happening in the area, but the sort of consistent thing that's remained is just like all of these hoardings around and lots of sites awaiting development. This used to be the only playground in the area, and then that was demolished just before we started work on the project. And now this is the only playground left. It's a pretty sad state of affairs. And we sort of wanted to create a place for the children there for them to gain some sort of like control over an area that was seeing so much change, and that was sort of like self-determined place for self-determined play, where they had a genuine sort of agency over a space. And so we started looking at the adventure playground movement, and also this amazing project in Berlin where these structures are made by the children every year, and they're dismantled, and then each year they make them again under the supervision with play workers. And so this was the site, and this is the organisation. So it's a place where children take the lead and are free to play as they choose, and they make decisions about the day-to-day life of the playground. And so as soon as we had access to the site, we brought children onto it. So they have been there since the beginning. And we started by as soon as we bring material on, the children had access to use it for play. So it started to familiarise them to how this site could be used. And it was, And so a lot of the investment, the majority of the investment in this project has actually gone into working with the play workers and setting up the organisation much more than the actual construction of the space. And so we've ended up building a space that is actually, it doesn't have very many structures at all, but is more of a sort of landscape and has lots of sort of loose parts and stuff that could be made and destroyed and remade somewhere else by the children, and for them learning to work with each other. So last project I'll talk about is our work in Granby. We've been working here for the last few years, and it sort of germinated into a number of like different projects in the area. So Granby is an area in South Liverpool, made up of rows of terraced houses that were originally built to house the artisan workers in the 1900s. And as Liverpool's importance as a port city declined in the post-war era, with growing unemployment and shrinking population, it became a pretty tough economic and social situation there. There were the riots in '81 where people were protesting against the endemic police racism and this lack of economic opportunity. And these images really became the defining perception of Granby as an area. And over the 20 years since then, there were successive regeneration schemes that sought to like fix Granby through like very crude forms of sort of top-down planning. And what happened was that people would be moved, buildings would be demolished, and then the area would hope to start again, but really people and problems would just be displaced somewhere else. However, the people in the area consistently fought against these plans. They also saw value in many of the things that the authority didn't. So the buildings, which spoke of a much more prosperous era of Liverpool's past, the sense of community there, and also the symbolic importance of the area as a centre of one of the oldest black populations in Europe. But the plans ploughed on, and most of the houses in the area were emptied, leaving just 4 of Granby's 14 streets still standing. And this is where we started work on the project. But this isn't a situation that's just common to Granby. There are lots of other areas in Liverpool that are also like this, and in the northwest. The residents were gradually working together. They took to the streets and started to take back control of their environment. And using domestic actions such as cleaning, painting, planting, they started to alert people to their presence there. And it meant that they had an immense amount of freedom to be able to sort of take control of their own area just because no one was looking and no one really cared. So they formed a community land trust and wanted to try and take back ownership of the few remaining properties that were left in Granby. And this is where we met them. We started to work with them to put together a proposal to take to the council in order to try and regain this ownership. And we looked at a scheme that was sort of suggesting a number of incremental, small approaches to start to rebuild Granby, thinking at quite a small scale. The project that we started with was refurbishing 10 of the houses on Cairn Street. And a lot of these houses were in very bad condition, but they weren't structurally unsound. And usually the process so far has just been to demolish them entirely and rebuild from scratch. But we wanted to sort of, keeping them was incredibly important to the area. And so we wanted to look at an approach that could try to sort of bring them back into use through refurbishment. And a lot of the times when there were elements where, they're missing a ceiling, we tried to incorporate that into the design of the refurbishment of the buildings. But where the roofs were particularly bad, there are a couple of occasions where there were particularly bad situations, like the roof has completely fallen down. We've turned them, and this is a project we're working on right now, we've turned this into a shared winter garden, which can be used by the residents as a sort of resource along the street. So you sort of, looks like a front door, but you go into this enormous greenhouse. And because Community Land Trust now own the properties, and they're selling them as affordable housing or renting them for social rent. And that is fantastic, but it was a real challenge because it has to be genuinely affordable. So it meant that we invested it meant the budget was very low. It meant that we invested the majority of the budget into sort of making it last for a long time, like insulation and structural repairs and stuff. But then using sort of simple and economic materials to sort of refurbish the houses. But then we wanted to try and bring some of the opportunism and the spontaneity that the CLT had taken to the streets into the house, bring them back into the houses. And we started looking at that through sort of smaller furniture, sort of playful items. And those are things like using an off-the-shelf product but turning it into something a bit more joyful. So there's the white tile that we are collaging a sort of ceramic decal, which is basically like a ceramic cut-out paper, and firing that using the bathrooms. Making the doorknobs, which are fired in a barbecue, so they look all smoky. And the fireplaces, which are made from the aggregate, is using all of the demolition rubble in the surrounding projects to sort of as the aggregate for the concrete fireplaces. And we made these all on site. Took over one of the houses that was currently being refurbished as a place to cure all the concrete. And then this is one of the ones installed. So at this point, the project was nominated for the Turner Prize, which is quite a surprise. And we wanted to think about how we could capitalise on all of the sort of attention that the Turner Prize gets. Okay, thanks. And all of the attention that the Turner Prize gets as to how we can get people to genuinely invest in Granby and support its sort of continued growth. And so we set up Granby Workshop, which was basically developing the products that we were already making for the houses, but creating a sort of permanent place in Granby that generated employment for people to make these products. So we took over one of the empty shop units on Granby High Street, which is again totally abandoned. There are about 2 or 3 shops there now, and started making all the products that would then go on to be launched effectively in the Turner Prize exhibition. So for the exhibition, we made what is basically the first Granby Workshop showroom, which sort of rebuilt what looks like the sort of carcass of a house, and exhibited all of the products that were being made in Granby. And it was a chance for people to be able to buy these products when they went to the exhibition. And they were just being also sold as they would be sold, like price-wise, as being sold as they would anywhere else. There was no sort of special art price. And then as part of that, we also launched the Granby Workshop website and made a catalogue. And now Granby Workshop is up and running and available for people to buy products. And straight after the Turner Prize, we had like a massive amount of orders, but it's all gradually petered down from there. But we sell stuff like these concrete lights and these door handles, and all of the products are made by, embrace sort of chance, and that sort of made by clearly made by the hands of the maker. And these are the handles that are fired in the barbecue. This is the fabric print, which is made from wood offcuts from the workshop using block print. And a terracotta lampshade. And Granby Workshop, it employs people who have either lived in Granby or have a strong relationship to it. And since the Turner Prize, we've been basically developing the business plan so it can last for a really long time, which feels incredibly important to the area that this thing does stay here. And is sustainable. So that's the challenge at the moment. But This is basically based on the belief that making things, whether at the scale of a door handle, building, or a neighborhood, can be an empowering process and give you a new way of seeing and understanding your surroundings, no longer as fixed or intransigent, but as malleable and full of possibilities. And there's lots of different people who have been involved. Everyone has different aspirations. And progress so far has been made through small steps and being opportunistic. And we hope that this will continue. So thanks for listening.